Hey, what's going on, Don't Unfriend Me Nation? I just wanted to leave you a quick message. Tonight's show is a little bit different. We are doing the live show from last night, and a lot of people seem to appreciate the discussion about ammonium nitrate and the missing train car and putting all the connective tissue together. So that's what we're going to do. Hope you like it. It's a long one. It's over an hour, but you can listen to it in a few parts. And if you want to watch the live video and actually see all the maps and everything else and the photographs, which most people probably will, you got to head over to Twitter, Facebook. You can go to Rumble, YouTube. Just find me at The Dumb Show, and you can find that live show. Just that would be the May 23rd post on Tuesday evening around 8 o'clock. If you want to go take a look at that, I will talk to you all soon and see you tonight a little bit later at 9 o'clock on the Don't Unfriend Me Show live. Thanks. Tonight, the Nazi U-Haul and the foreshadowing. I wanted you to kind of put this in perspective. There was a U-Haul truck last night late that ran into the outer bollards of Washington, D.C., specifically the White House. Now, if you guys don't know this, the White House has about a half a mile of bumper all around it where you can't get into. They did this because people would jump over the fence and things like that. And after, January 6th, they even got more stringent. But this one hit the outer bollards and it really did nothing. But it's interesting what was in the U-Haul. That's important. So we'll talk about that. Biden's default. I have the timeline for you. And every single step of the way of how Biden says that for the last 90 days, he's been working diligently to get a hold of the Republicans, but this is a complete lie. Melanie, is it playing on Rumble, Olivia?
Yeah.
Yeah. Melanie, exit out and go back in and see if that helps. Ammonia nitrate, Nazi, domestic terror, all of it is connected. And that's what there's some sinew tonight where everything kind of is, except for Target is selling some weird stuff. We'll go over that tonight. We have a ton of videos, ton of things to show. And Olivia and I will be bringing it to you for your consumption. All right, let's get to it. We got a lot to do tonight. Starting off with, let's go ahead and start off with this. There was, and I hope Facebook is nice to me because these images are all open and released. But the first thing we'll kind of start off with is this image, which I'm going to blow it up in the big screen. So hold on so everyone can kind of see. This is the U-Haul that last night someone decided to go ahead and rent a U-Haul. And the government pulled out a Nazi flag. Now, it's interesting because, Olivia, have you heard about this? I know you and I were sitting down watching the game.
I have not.
All right. Well, here's the interesting thing. This is what they found last week. And this was in regards to one of the shooters that did the big shooting in Texas. And that he has some fresh tattoos. If you take a look at that SS tattoo and the swastika, they look fresh. Now, I've got just a few tattoos, and Olivia's got a few tattoos. And the tattoos, to me, look really new. In fact, it looks like he's sitting in a tat chair.
It does look like he is.
Getting them done, right? And it looks like they're new. Now, if you're about ready, okay, I want to just, let's do a hypothetical because I have no idea. By the way, this guy's Mexican, which is interesting. So a Mexican Nazi, that's new. It'd almost be funny if the guy in the U-Haul van who had a Nazi flag would be an Indian. Now dots, not feathers, more like, versus, how, tonto. Would you like a Slurpee versus would you like to sit down and smoke some peyote? Is that racist? It's not. It's a joke. But this guy, it would be really funny if the guy in the swastika and the Nazi flag was Indian. And, oh, wow, guess what? He's Indian. Why is it that Mexicans and Indians have Nazi flags? It doesn't make much sense, does it?
No. Not at all.
Why would they? Well, so let me ask you a question. Let's do some assumption. Let's do some things. Okay. Now, I've told you all to do some homework and watch Life of David Gale. Olivia, you remember that movie?
A very good movie.
And Life of David Gale is essentially this person is so against the death penalty, he sets himself up, even though he's innocent, to die from the death penalty because he's dying anyway. And ultimately, they would have to reverse it. Once they had, incontrovertible evidence that it failed, once he was killed and he was innocent, then they would absolve the death penalty. So essentially creating a false flag inside of the judiciary. Now, I'm not accusing the U.S. government of falsifying a flag. What I'm saying is that there's a very large narrative taking place that is concerning to me because it's all like Joe Biden came up with this address at college and was doing a dissertation or whatever you would call it when you go to a college. And there's also something that sounds a little like this.
It's disappointing that our discussions in the congressional Republicans have not been willing to discuss raising revenues.
Yeah, that's not the right one. Everyone saw it on last week's show. It's where he said that the number one, the biggest threat to the United States is domestic terrorism, specifically white nationalist or white racism, essentially, is the biggest thing. So it was an HBC graduation address, not a dissertation. It doesn't matter. So he put it out there that white supremacy is the biggest, most threatening thing to the United States. And I told you that this language is now being spread throughout the DNC, and it's all across the morning talk shows and all the pundits. And if this is true, this is the biggest threat to the United States, even though there's only 5,671 some odd cases of racial injustice or what's considered a hate crime in the United States a year, which is infinitesimal. I think getting bit by a Yorkie is more consistent than hate crime, Olivia. Did you look that up? Is that true? The Yorkie is the most devastating puppy on the land. Is that correct?
The most vicious dog? Is that what you want me to
Yeah,
look up?
I don't think you need to look it up. I think we all know the Yorkie, that son of a bitch, is the worst ever. But when we look at this guy rents a U-Haul truck and decides to ram it into bollards. I have the video. Let's watch it real quick. And then we're going to talk about it because I truly believe that this is... Well, let's just watch this. Wow. Looks like you drive and live. Investigators found a Nazi swastika flag that reportedly came from inside the truck.
What is he driving into?
The bollards, the target things that, yeah. Secret Service spokesperson said police detained the driver and that some roads and pedestrian walkways were closed after the incident. So you have a guy who is driving into bollards. According to officials, there were no injuries and the crash remained under investigation. But let me ask a question. Would it have been under investigation if the guy didn't have a Nazi flag? And what's going to happen to him now that he did crash into that? Is it drunk and disorderly? Is it what? And the whole thing that changes this entire conversation is the fact that there was a Nazi flag. This would be really a no-nonsense thing, no big deal. But once you have a Nazi flag. So let me ask you a question. You've got 326 million people out there, right? And they're in the United States. And Joe Biden says, hey, the most dangerous thing in the world are white supremacists and domestic terrorists, which are white nationalists. And then within a couple of weeks of each other, you get this major shooting with a guy who has fresh swastika tattoos. Now, if you're going to give up your life and you don't care, right? You're just going to give up your life. And you're like, I don't really care if I live or die. I believe that Republicans are bad and they're evil, and this world, I need to escape this world. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get some fresh Nazi tattoos because I don't care if I live or die, because I'm going to go die. I'm going to go shoot a bunch of people. I might as well go ahead and lay this at the ground of white supremacy and Republicans. Let's just assume that's true. And then let's go ahead and assume that this guy is an idiot who is a person of color, BIPOC, the only thing Democrats care about is people of color. And then I'm going to go ahead and get a Nazi flag and put it inside my U-Haul and crash a White House barricade. And I'm just going to go ahead and have this Nazi flag, which doesn't look used, which looks like it's fresh out of the package. In fact, when they fold it up, it literally has its creases still in it. And then I'm going to go ahead and have Biden declare that white supremacy is the most dangerous domestic threat on earth. And then I'm going to go ahead and have 60,000 pounds of ammonium nitrate go missing from a couple of white supremacists 25 some odd years ago with the Oklahoma City bombing. Timothy McVeigh, who used 5,000 pounds of explosive, which was diesel fuel mixed with ammonium nitrate, and I'm not going to go into any other specifics because I'm not here to teach you how to make a bomb. And then we're going to go ahead and do what? Lay these breadcrumbs all over the place. Just these little nuance that are saying, yeah, something's going to happen. Something bad's going to happen. Of course something bad's going to happen. Why do we know something bad's going to happen? Because Joe Biden says it's the biggest threat to the United States possible. It's the biggest threat possible. This is what happened with 5,000 pounds of the stuff. A third of the Oklahoma City Federal Center was blown up. I wonder what is going to happen. Because I've been noticing this, and I told you this a couple of weeks ago, that I was going to Glenn Beck this for you and say, guys, this to me looks like a big psyop. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist. This is the things that we would do in disinformation. I'll tell you all about the train. That's coming up. And trust me, I am going to go into it for you. I'll tell you the entire route it took. I'll show you what is on the route. I will show you EPA recommendations of what should have happened. All of these things are coming. So stay tuned. But to me, it feels like a big psyop. And I'm not a psyop guy. Listen, I understand MK Ultra. I understand testing on the Tuskegee Airmen. I understand what happened to Native Americans. I understand what happened with the Mujahideen. I understand what happened with Iran. I understand what happened in Greece. I understand what happened in Afghanistan. I understand that the CIA was responsible for creating Al-Qaeda and ISIS and Osama bin Laden, and that Osama bin Laden worked for the United States government against the Russians. I know this too. I understand. But to me, nothing has been so blatantly obvious as we are seeing with this white nationalist talk. I believe that it's going to be the thing that happens that keeps Biden in office. Because I've been saying that for 2.5 years. The only thing that's going to keep Biden in office is war or a major tragic event in the United States. I've been saying this for how long? So if that's the case, why do we continue to keep hearing this narrative and seeing Nazi flags show up when I haven't seen any of this at Trump rallies? I haven't seen any of the supporters of Donald Trump support white nationalism, minus some idiot soy boys and Mayo Yiannopoulos and that other douchebag. What was that guy's name? Jesse or whatever. The Mexican guy who hates Jewish people and who we had dinner with, who trolled me, and all of his little followers attacked me. Remember?
Yep. I don't remember his name.
Ridiculous. But I don't see that stuff. But you've got this guy who is all tatted out, and you've got a guy who runs a U-Haul into the White House, bollards, essentially the defense area that's quarantined off. And then you've got ammonium nitrate, which looks like little foam styrofoam balls, 60,000 pounds of this stuff. And if you think 60,000 pounds of this stuff, which is most of it's air, Nick Fuentes, thank you. And you've got all this, and then you've got them talking about Oklahoma City and white nationalist is Timothy McVeigh. And then you've got the EPA releasing statements about ammonium nitrate as early as 2022, January and June of 2022. And I've got those article clippings to show you. Is it all together? Is it all a big foreshadowing of what's to come? Now, I don't want to wake up in a detention camp tomorrow, so I'm not going to go too much further. Because speculation is not something I like to play with. But when I continue to see, good night, brother man. See you, bro. But when I continue to see this type of stuff, and it's all of it is really circumspect and nuance, that there's nobody getting it. Like, and then take a look at the Patriot Front, the guys in the white mask who go through Washington. Well, they were a hate group. I'll tell you all about the nitrate in a minute. But isn't it interesting that Patriot Front group marches in Washington, D.C., and then folds up their flags in a U-Haul and just saunters off? No, they're not temporary tats. Those are raised skin. Those are tattoos. They're tattoos, and you got tattoos. But if you're going to go die and you don't care, why not go ahead and get some Nazi tattoos?
I haven't heard of white nationalism and racism being an issue until just recently when the Democratic Party has brought it up.
Well, of course.
It was never an issue while I was growing up.
No, and they laid, January 6th was all, Proud Boys and but how come there's no delineation of lines to this stuff? Why isn't there like, hey folks, we've made some arrests. We've made some arrests on the Patriot Front, and we've gotten a couple of their leaders, and they're being detained and being questioned because some of their stuff is not above board. Or we now want to go ahead and release the all of the manifesto from this Nazi shooter, all of these Facebook posts, and literally just have just a diatribe of information ready to go. But we still haven't released the trans shooters manifesto and plans because it's too dangerous. It's too dangerous to society. What the hell are we talking about here? How does that make any sense? So the selective outrage and the selective release of information is what makes me go, what the hell's going on? Now, if you think that's weird, wait till you hear the next part, because that's weird. I mean, would you agree that's weird, Olivia?
I'm sorry, I was reading.
Is that weird, Olivia, what we just talked about, or not?
I was reading text. I didn't hear what you
Mexican
said.
Nazis, Indian Nazis, Nazis flags in U-Hauls with no weapons. The Patriot Front marching on Washington with upside down flags saying they're white nationalist groups. Joe Biden coming out and saying that the white nationalist groups are the biggest threat to the United States. These are the things I'm asking you.
It all just seems a little coincidental to me. Yeah, it's definitely weird.
Right. We haven't heard anything about this stuff and how long, and now all of a sudden everything's white nationalists. It's like the Harlem Shake and planking. All of a sudden, it's everywhere. So to me, it's a little wonky. But this makes it even more wonky. Now, I want to talk about a couple things about the EPA and the June 22nd or June 6th, I believe, 2022, these articles that came out in regards to the handling of toxic chemicals. And Olivia, I know you're online, but I would really appreciate if you could pay attention here because you're a host on the show now, and I want your opinions. So this topic came out, and it was a chemical advisory about solid ammonium nitrate, also known as AN, storage, handling, and management. And it's titled that the advisory contains information on recent past accidents involving ammonium nitrate, commonly referred to as AN, on the hazards of AN and how to manage these hazards and appropriate steps for community emergencies, planning, and proper emergency response. Now, why would this come out in the 22nd? Well, you remember in Lebanon, there was that supposedly fireworks plant that blew up and was full of ammonium nitrate. But that's not what they said. It wasn't because of what happened in Lebanon. It goes all the way back to 2013, a Texas fire where a couple thousand pounds of this went off and a few people were killed, that they go back and talk about this. Well, why would they be referencing it almost 9 years, almost 10 years later, all of a sudden get a wild hair up their ass to start talking about the chemical advisory and the ammonium nitrate storage, handling, and management? It seems a little bit wonky that would come up. Why now? What was it that made them go, So I started going through this, and I started looking at this. So here's my question started, and then here they preface it in the middle of the memo. And it says, incidents involving AN, ammonium nitrate, are rare, considering that the United States uses millions of tons of AN annually. Yet, as described below, they can have severe consequences. Pure AN is stable at ambient temperature and pressure. While the chemical itself does not burn, AN supports and accelerates the combustion of organic and some inorganic material, increasing the fire hazard and complicating firefighting challenges. AN may explode when exposed to a strong shock or when subjected to sustained high temperature in confinement. Nothing really blows my skirt up, except for the fact when they said, it's extremely rare for it to explode. Now, here's where we start getting interesting stuff. Now, just hang tight, because this whole thing, if you haven't shared this out, do it. I know we got 150 on. It's a busy show. But please, get this out there, because it's about to get better. Because we're about to go through trains, maps, and trains, planes, and automobiles, folks. It's going to be interesting. Ammonium nitrate does burn, but melts and begins to undergo decomposition at 337 degrees or 170 degrees Celsius. Folks, you're not going to get that on a hot noonday sun, unless you have an accelerant that burns at a rapid rate. Some sort of oil or gasoline or some sort of combustible material. Everyone understand? It needs essentially a cataclysmic event or a catalyst to do that. How you get a fire is essentially fuel, heat, and, oh my God, why am I missing the third one? Fuel, heat, and air. And you have those three things, and you have a fire. And that's where you get wood to combust. But with this, it's a little bit stickier. You're going to need something that is actually going to have this combust, C4, or some sort of detonator to make this go off. Decomposition creates toxic gases containing ammonia and nitrogen oxides and heat. The resulting nitrogen oxides can support combustion even in the absence of other sources of oxygen. Interesting. So you don't need oxygen at this point. Like I said, you need an accelerant. The ammonium and the toxic gas would replace oxygen in this case and becomes extremely volatile. Fuel, heat, and oxygen. That's correct. Thank you. Just took me a second. I'm tired. When confined, the heat and gases cannot dissipate. As the pressure and temperature rise, the rate of decomposition increases and may cause an explosion. So let me ask you a question, Olivia. If I wanted to create something like a pressure cooker bomb that happened at the Boston Marathon, and I wanted to go ahead and put a bunch of ball bearings and bad stuff in a pressure cooker, do you think the pressure cooker enhances the explosion or detracts and makes it smaller? A pressure cooker.
Probably make it bigger.
Make it bigger. That is the correct answer. Give yourself a point if you have a little dingy. That is correct. Makes it bigger. Congratulations, Olivia. So what if you put it in a sealed container that was supposed to be sealed because any outside moisture or oxygen or any of the elements would therefore degrade the material and turn it into a liquid, or make it unstable because it would cake. So therefore, if you put it in a sealed train car, do you believe that it would make a larger explosion if something happened in a container like that? Just say yes, Liv.
Yes.
That's correct, Liv. It would make a bigger explosion because you're putting all of it in one place and putting all of your eggs in one basket, which is the EPA says don't do. So there's a couple things that we would have to assume. So hang on. During a fire in a facility where AN is present, the AN may melt and decompose, making the material more sensitive to shock and detonation. Like I said, in a large AN pile, localized area of high temperature may be sufficiently confined by mass material to initiate an explosion. The explosion of some small quantity of AN in a confined space, e.g. a pipe, remember that, to initiate an explosion of larger nearby quantities. So what if we were to say that a spark from an axle or the overall railway and moving of the train car created a spark? What if an errant rock skipped up, something that has some sort of spark quality, and it's leaking? Could that create an explosion? Possibly. What if that open seal on that ultimately was leaking like they said? Well, would that be an open source of a chance to ignite what's going on under the car? Possibly. What if there's residue that's on the outside? What if it was raining? What if that train is kicking up snow and everything else, and obviously the mixture of that and that open spot creates some gases? Is it possible? Well, all of those things are possible. So in this case, you would not have ammonium nitrate, Liv, sitting in a car moving like this, like a bunch of balls, tiny little pieces like styrofoam moving in a train car as it bounces up and down. Now, what if it derails? Would that be considered a large impact if a train derails, Olivia? Yes or no?
Probably yes.
Probably, Liv. A large impact, a train derailing is probably. It's a probable large impact, or it's a guaranteed large impact?
Guaranteed.
Thank you, Olivia. Give yourself another applause. That's correct. Doing very well tonight. So when I'm traveling with ammonium nitrate, what do you think I would put it in rather than a giant train car loosely? What do you think I should put it in? What do you think? What should I put it in, Liv?
I have no idea.
You just want to let it roll around?
No.
Just balls of styrofoam? What do you want?
You need to put it in a container.
What type of container, Olivia?
I have no idea.
I don't know. What type of container, Olivia?
Well, you gotta understand, I gotta test.
What type of container, Olivia? What type of container?
I don't even know what that is.
Why don't you look right there? That big giant fucking blue thing, Liv. What do you think that is?
It's a barrel.
That's right, Olivia. Oh my God, you got it completely. Why don't you hit the button?
Yeah, I'm gonna pass on that one.
No, I want you to hit the button, please. Hit the button. You deserve it.
Okay.
There you go. Yeah, sweetie. It's going to be barrels. And those drums are going to be impervious to what? Well, corrosion and acid. You've watched Breaking Bad. What happens when you put hydrochloric acid or sulfuric acid inside one of those drums?
Nothing.
Nothing. Why? Because it's impervious to those type of chemicals. So you're going to put it in plastic drums, large drums, 50-barrel drums, and you're going to put on there explosive and dangerous, and level 3 corrosivity could make these things ignite, because you're not going to have it just rolling around in a train car. Because why? Well, you're going to put it in drums, and you're going to have your heat signature. If you look right here, see that little thing right here? See this that I'm outlining, everybody? You're going to have your yellow, blue, and red. One stands for, the yellow is corrosivity, I believe. The red is its heat index and when that chemical is vulnerable. And I believe the air that gets into that, like a copper sulfate or something to that effect. The blue is the amount of oxygen or hydrogen or whatever that gets into it. Now, I could be wrong. I don't know that perfectly. Yeah, not a 5-gallon, a 55-gallon drum. Thank you, Ramon. and I also could be wrong, but if I remember my swimming pool, those are what the indicators of yellow, red, and blue. Please, maybe it's liquidity. Maybe it's some sort of H2O mixture could also set off and ignite certain things. I know certain potassium chloride, when you add hand sanitizer or alcohol to it, can immediately combust. I know water on some things can actually make things combust. But you tell me if I'm wrong. I think I'm right on the red and yellow. But either way, my science might be off. But there again, you would put it in a container, not in a train, an open train. Okay, so now we all agree on that. So the whole thing now is it was liquid, is what they said. Now it's not liquid. Now they're saying that it ultimately was a leaky valve underneath the train, Liv. Yeah, and that leaky valve was solid ammonium nitrate, that it wasn't in liquid form, it was in pellet form. Remember this I showed you? Uh-huh. And if this is in pellet form like this, it's going to be in barrels. Does everyone agree? Great. So let me ask you a question. If it's in barrels, 55-gallon barrels, and it's 66,000 pounds of this stuff, can someone explain to me how it leaked? How did it leak?
Magic. And
since you don't want to put this in one train car, you would put it in how many train cars, Liv?
Multiple
train car. You're doing great. I love this.
Maybe Voldemort held up the train.
It's possible. Maybe Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid were available, and they did escape Mexico. We did see that the Alcatraz prisoners, they actually have more information on them, which is interesting. But if it's in 55-gallon drums and 60,000 pounds of the 30 tons to be exact, please explain to me how it leaked out of a valve. Hold that question for a moment, won't you? But shouldn't that be interesting? 360 pounds each in those barrels, 55-gallon drums. So let's do the math. Olivia?
Yes.
The math would be 360 pounds divided into 60,000. Please let me know how many drums that would be. Remember, I did
167.
I said it was 155 last show. Well, now that is my just basic math. So 167 drums, 55-gallon drums. Well, shall we look at the dimensions of 55-gallon drums? Olivia?
Yes.
Dimensions of 55-gallon drums. Let's look at this together because we're friends. Because I don't believe in bullshit. So if we're going to look at the dimensions of a 55-gallon drum, and we're going to bring it up here on the old computer in a beautiful photograph. And it's all in Chinese. Of course it is. How could we expect anything less? Of course it's in Chinese. And folks, my Mandarin is rusty, so I'm not even going to try. So let's go ahead and turn that off. And let's go get something in English, shall we? 35 3/8 inches tall. And 22 inches and the base. There's a 55-gallon drum. 35 inches tall. So it's basically 3 feet tall by 2 feet wide. Does everyone agree? Liv?
Yes.
Train car width, height, average. Okay, let's do this on the fly. We'll allow that. And if we go ahead and try to look at a car length, 39 to 50 feet, okay? Let's give it 50 feet. Olivia, please do 50 feet divided by 3.
17.
17-gallon drums stacked lengthwise. And the width of a car is about 15 feet. So let's go ahead and do the 15 feet. That's 3 drums a piece. So that's 3 and 5 is 15. So you're going to be able to do 5 drums wide. 17 times 5, Olivia.
85.
85 drums in one train car. And 85 and 85 is what, Liv? 170.
170.
You're 3 short of the 167 math that we did. And that's assuming that you stack them single and not double, because that's a lot of ammonium nitrate. So now we're talking what? 2 train cars? And let's assume that they're not going to put 30,000 pounds of ammonium nitrate in one train car. Do you think, Liv?
That would be pretty dumb.
That would be pretty stupid. So let's just go ahead and say they put it in 3 or 4. So now, how did 60,000 pounds in one train car happen? If you did, you would have to do the following, if my math is correct. Olivia?
You have to stack the barrels.
You would have to stack the barrels high. And at 3 feet, you're talking 6 feet high. Well, what's the average train car height? 13 feet. So you would have to do 6 feet of barrels in one train car in an average of 13 feet high. Does everyone agree?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Does that make sense to anybody?
Yeah, it makes sense to me.
Aggregate train car, Ramon says to look up. Images of an aggregate train car. And dimensions. Well, I'm looking at it right now. Exterior width is 10 feet. So you're going to be able to fit 3 barrels. Now it even gets worse. Now it's 3 high. Aren't they going to be separated with something? And are 360-pound drums and 360-pound drums on top of each other? So you're talking overall, what, almost 800 pounds on the top 2 barrels? On the bottom barrel? You're going to put them 3 high? So you're going to put 60,000 pounds. I know, folks, this is why I'm telling you how stupid this is. I'm not a conspiracy theorist at all. I'm a simple person doing the math. And it doesn't make any sense to me. Because we're not done yet. We haven't even scratched the surface of this. Because we've got more to talk about. So let's go ahead and look at some more pictures. Because the EPA says some different things than what we're seeing. So we've got overall that the EPA put out a warning about ammonium nitrate based on an explosion in 2013. Now here we go. Are you ready? Here we go, because this is interesting. Bins for storing bulk ammonium nitrate. Olivia, are you following along? Yes. There will be a test afterwards. Should be kept clean and free of contaminants. Bins should not be constructed or galvanized of iron, copper, alloys, copper, lead, or zinc unless suitably protected. Aluminum or wooden bins should be protected against impregnation by ammonium nitrate, 29 CFR 1910.109 I4II and 4IIB. It's the coding of this. So storage in bulk, it should absolutely follow those parameters, which also lends to the credence that it would be in 55-gallon barrels. We all agree. Great. So let's move on to the next thing, which is the Clean Air Act and Prevention General Duty by the EPA, that we have to do the following if there's an accident or spillage or leakage in mass quantity. And let's assume that 60,000 pounds is a lot. Let's remember that the Timothy McVeigh explosion at Oklahoma City in the federal building was not all ammonium nitrate. That was diesel fuel also, which takes up a large amount of weight. That it was only, I think, 2,200 to 3,000 pounds of ammonium nitrate. So let's go ahead and read this. Section 112R of the Clean Air Act, the CAA, focuses on prevention of chemical accidents Under this provision of the CAA, all facilities with regulated substances or other extremely hazardous substances have a general duty to prevent and mitigate accidental release. Under Section 112R1, the general duty is to identify hazards using appropriate hazard assessment techniques to design and maintain a safe facility, taking such steps are necessary to prevent releases and to minimize the consequences of accidental releases which do occur. Although we haven't seen any claimed by the EPA, except in 2013, which had nothing to do with a rail car. This general duty applies to facilities producing, processing, handling, or storing extremely hazardous substances while not a regulated substance, and may be considered extremely hazardous under certain circumstances. Okay, fair, all fair in love and war. So interesting. Let's go to the next thing. They are required to report it and clean it up. The hazardous materials, the DOT, wait a second, guess who is responsible for this? Well, it's under Pete Buttigieg. The Department of Transportation, the DOT, regulates transportation of ammonium nitrate under its hazardous materials regulations. For information, see 49 CFR subchapter C. And it does bottom line to Pete Buttigieg, the Department of Transportation, Transportation Secretary, oversees all transportation and distribution and movement of ammonium nitrate at this level and scale. Now, isn't that interesting, considering that Mr. Salmon Farmer wants to go ahead and save the salmon and the roadways and the causeways, but isn't necessarily interested in 60,000 pounds of ammonium nitrate missing? Because we certainly haven't heard a lot about it. So now we have that to ponder and to pontificate. Here's the big thing for me. And as I was doing some exploring, I wanted to know a few things about this. One is, where does it move? Where does it cross? Where does it dissect when it's being transported? So I found out that this was not California to Wyoming like it was initially reported. It was from Cheyenne, Wyoming, en route to the Mojave Valley, California, undisclosed location. But more importantly, Bakersfield, Fresno area, and that would be the FNO station or BKR station for Union Pacific Railroad. But its origination was in Union Pacific, Cheyenne, Wyoming. If we take a look, there's your Cheyenne, Wyoming, a place where Olivia and I spent some time.
Shithole.
In a shithole. Now, if we go ahead and look at this, and then we look at the other window, the railway map, if I go ahead and zoom out here, and I want to go ahead and go over to Cheyenne, Wyoming, there's Albuquerque, there's LRC, which is in Kansas, and if I want to go over to Wyoming, it'd be right here. Here's Colorado Springs, here's Denver, and we fall right at Cheyenne Station, which is known as Cheyenne Yard. You can take a look at its call sign right there, Cheyenne Yard. There's also a Grand Central train hub right there. Olivia and I know exactly where this is at. Okay? Now, the line takes two ways out. This yellow line is where the train goes, and the thicker the line is the bulk of the traffic. You have a northern route, which would take you up into the Montanese and go up parallel with I-25 all the way up north. You have another line, and this gets interesting. You have another line that goes down south to Denver, which is these two lines here, and they split, goes through Fort Collins, goes through Greeley. Greeley is a cow town, and Fort Collins is a college town, which has some chemical plants, a few other things, also CSU campuses there. But Greeley really is a cowboy hick town. Okay? Are we following? Great. Now, as it goes across, you have some choices. You can either go up north through Laramie, or you can go down south to Denver and then cut across and take the southern exposure, which is also whether you decide to go down to the southern pass through I-70, which would take you up through the northern pass, or you can go down through Colorado Springs and cut over down south here, which would take you down to more of the desert climate, depending upon what time of the year is when you travel. If you have a good radiator, you go ahead and go down the southern route all times of the year. If you don't, you go up north. And if you don't have a good alternator like Olivia and I didn't, we took the southern route, and halfway through Phoenix, our alternator didn't charge our battery, and our AC went off with the cats in the car, and everyone was dying.
Oh, that was fun.
And we wound up almost dead from heat exhaustion. It was like 120 out there on the pavement. Now, when it comes to this train and where it went, it's pretty simple where it came to and what it did, and I'll show you. This train was in Wyoming, in Cheyenne, and it came across this route here through Rock Springs and then Salt Lake City. Now, once it was in Salt Lake City, what did it decide to do, which was go south down the Southern Pass. Okay? Everyone following me so far? As it comes down through the Southern Pass, it enters an interesting place known as LV, or Las Vegas. And the Union Pacific can come out to Boulder City, and it's got a secondary railway, which is a branch line. Branch line are not Union Pacific railroads, but competitive railroads or secondary railroads that they will lease and borrow. Does that make sense? Great. So they come through northern Las Vegas, and I want you just to take a gander at what is just north of Las Vegas. Well, let me show you. Electronic Combat Systems, ECS. Range 74A. These all sound familiar to me. I know these areas because this is the Nevada National Security Site. And it's right up against the National Wildlife Refuge, which is government controlled. And this entire swath of area, which is red zone, electronic counter warfare, these ranges, electronic combat systems, skunk works, and many other McDonnell Douglas. And they're housing a certain unknown type of technology and government-run business here, which you may have heard of in your off time near Groom Lake, which would be Area 51.
I always thought Area 51 was in New Mexico.
No. So it's not. It's in Nevada. So now that we have, you give yourself a buzz for that. So now that you have Area 51 in Nevada, just a casual observation, no big deal. I just figured you'd want to know that right next to this railway, right in the heart of this, is Area 51. Interesting. Is it a coincidence? Of course it's a coincidence. No big deal. Because military bases are usually very, very close to railways. Why? Well, because they move aircraft, Humvees, ammonium nitrate, explosives, jet fuel, all those type of things. But just some food for thought, ammonium nitrate is going here. Now, it continues its southerly path, and you have a choice. Here's Oxnard and Ventura, California. I grew up all on these. In fact, the Union Pacific went by my house every 3 hours, and we were literally 125 feet from the railroad tracks. So it goes right through here, but it also goes down through Barstow, Las Vegas. Now, some people are like, well, Matt, it could have went up here through Reno and Carson City, as you can see, and come down this line, but that's not what it did, because its path was to end up somewhere outside of the Mojave Valley. And here's the interesting thing, folks, is that when you look here, Let's go back to Wyoming, and I want to show you something that you missed. Is that my good friend Mel said, well, Ellis Air Force Base. Well, I'm going to do you better than Ellis. All inside Wyoming, this map sucks, by the way, because it does not zoom in properly, so I apologize. It's not exactly fantastic, and you lose your place constantly. Bear with me. I also have it turned down so it's not too bright. There's Denver. There's Wyoming. There's Casper. And here's Cheyenne. Okay. So if we go back to Cheyenne, which is right down here, I want you to look at what's on the railroad. Right here, a base I've been to many times, is Warren Air Force Base, which is on the northern line. If you went the Northern Pass, it goes right through Warren Air Force Base. Union Pacific does. And remember, right down here in this area is the actual petrol company who created the actual ammonium nitrate. And they do. Now, the interesting thing is that if you go ahead and look a little further on Google Maps, you're going to see something called China Lake, something I'm very familiar with. We used to go watch the SR-71s out in Lancaster and Palmdale, and we would go over and see them coming from China Lake and fly over. Because the thing you need to know about China Lake is it's not just called China Lake, it also is a weapons testing center that happens to be, if we go all the way back here, and I was looking and going, well, wait a second. If it was supposed to be in the Mojave Valley and it went through Barstow and came up, where the hell is it going to stop in Bakersfield? Because we have these red lines here. These red lines are high-speed lines. Now, this is the one from Bakersfield, which is the light rail, I believe. From Lancaster, comes up through Fresno, goes through the San Fernando Valley, and comes up here and goes up this line. It's a high-speed rail. Now, my whole thought was, wait a second, where the hell is this thing going to go? Where's this ammonium nitrate going to end up? And where they found it was a little place called Saltdale. And if we take a look at Saltdale, it's real easy to see. It's straight across from Bakersfield. And Olivia and I know this well because we lived here too. Here's Bakersfield. There's Oildale. And if you come across, Saltdale is on this line. So if we type in Saltdale, there it is. There's beautiful Saltdale where they found the empty one single train car of ammonium nitrate. But if you go north of this, it's pretty interesting. I want you to look at what's here. Edwards Air Force Base. Whoops. That's pretty close. That is right below Saltdale. Everyone see that? There's Edwards Air Force Base. And now I'm going to go ahead and type in Saltdale. Whoop. Just north. But wait a second. There's more. Tell them what they won, Brett. How about we do China Lake? China Lake. And there is your Naval Air Weapons Station, China Lake, which is north of Saltdale. I know both because I grew up in these areas, and we used to go out and look at all the beautiful places. Here's Saltdale. Here's Saltdale. There's China Lake. Now, hold on, folks. Hold on to your ass. Here's Edwards Air Force Base. This is what I found because I love doing this shit. It's not that I'm a conspiracy theorist. I'm just letting you know what I found. Now, I'm going to come on over here, and what's that? What is that? What's that yellow thing? That's connected to the southern route of trains. Hold on. There it is. There's Las Vegas. and it comes down. Here's high speed, so it comes here, goes on this swath. This is all owned by Union Pacific. They want to save money. Here's your Barstow, California. And then it comes over here, and its destination is somewhere here in the Kern Valley in Bakersfield, or all the way up to Reno and Fresno. So somewhere here between here, Bakersfield, in this area was its final destination, but it stopped right here and took a right at Albuquerque like Bugs Bunny and went all the way up to Saltdale and ended on this, the only path there, which is straight across from Bakersfield. See? Remember what I told you? Here's Bakersfield right here, BFD, bum fucking Denver, and come across. And what do we see right over here on the end of this line? And let me zoom in for you. Remember, here's your line. And right here is the beautiful and well-known and lovely this time of year China Lake. China Lake Naval Weapons Center, Department of the Navy. So, what am I saying with all this information? Is this the new bioweapon labs in Ukraine? No. Is this the new conspiracy theory? No. But you have 60,000 pounds of ammonium nitrate missing, which literally should make the United States government fly off the handle. You have four major military bases, all within a stone's throw of this path. And it winds up missing at one of the largest naval weapons training centers where they send off the rockets. Port Hueneme is another one. When Port Hueneme sets off rockets, and Point Mugu, which are naval bases out of Oxnard and Port Hueneme, naval weapon center is usually where these things wind up and are left. I want to bring you to another point, which is Leroy, which he can't be here tonight, but I called him, is that what is one of the, hey, Olivia, you've been on the shows, you've listened, what is one of the most, out of Ukraine and Russia, one of the most prominent exports out of those two countries? Do you remember what they are? Does anyone remember what Olivia or what Leroy and I always used to say?
Oil?
No. Wheat. But wheat was going to have an extremely low yield and would create famine in African countries because of potash and fertilizer. Two things that are extremely inabundant from an export standpoint in Russia, which were both going to be in low yield, and fertilizer was going to be a huge commodity because Ukraine and Russia export them and they're at war. And if fertilizer is so on the low, wheat is going to have low yields and be extremely expensive. So if fertilizer is a huge commodity that is in rarer form now because of Russia and Ukraine, 60,000 pounds of ammonium nitrate is a lot of money. So everyone knew this because we talked about this. So now put it all together. You've got white supremacists from the Oklahoma City bombing that used ammonium nitrate, which is one of the easiest explosives to put together on the planet. You've got the United States government screaming to the top of their lungs that white supremacy is the biggest threat and danger to America over terrorists, over the border, over all of it, over fentanyl, over violence. American white nationalist, racist, extremist Nazis are the biggest fear. You've got all these dog whistles, Nazi flags and U-Hauls, Mexican nationalists with swastikas and SS tattoos that are freshly put on. You've got this whole tumultuous narrative that January 6th was put on by racists and white nationalists, and they are the biggest threat. And you constantly continue to see these signs leading up to the 2024 election. And what have I said for the last 2.5 years? The only way Joe Biden, and I even said this 2 years ago, is that the only way Joe Biden stays in office, because he's going to have the worst numbers we've ever seen, the most horrible numbers ever compared to any president, even worse than Carter, which I said, and they are, is a major war or attack on U.S. soil that brings the country together. So am I saying that you use ammonium nitrate for crops? That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you have chemicals that can be used for fertilizer in liquid form that are going to provide, and nitrate, which provides nitrogen to vegetables and bonds to vegetables and produces higher quality. So it doesn't matter. The point is fertilizer in itself is in a lack of abundance more than it ever has before because of Ukraine and Russia. And ammonium nitrate is considered, in the right proportions, mixed with the right chemicals and right catalysts, to provide extremely explosive material, also used in anfro. If anybody knows what anfro is, TNT basically. Very slow-moving, deliberately destructive, and tears in its explosive capacity. Where is it? Now, if it was simply if it simply leaked out, right? And that was true, even though they checked the valves and they said everything had integrity, because here's what they said. I want you to listen to what I showed you, and I want to hear what they said. A 30-ton shipment of a chemical that can be used as fertilizer or an explosive, wow, is missing from a California-bound railroad car after rail officials confirmed it disappeared during a trip across the West last month. The rail car, loaded with more than 60,000 pounds of ammonium nitrate, left Cheyenne, Wyoming on April 12th. A Union Pacific spokesperson told USA Today Tuesday. 2 weeks later, it was found empty at a rail stop in the California Mojave Desert, according to a report filed with the Federal National Response Center on May 10th. May 10th, almost 30 days later. Dino Noble said the material, the one in Cheyenne, Wyoming that I showed you, transported in pellet form in a covered hopper car, similar to those used to ship coal. A covered hopper car. 60,000 pounds is what it was. A covered hopper car, similar to those used to ship coal, likely fell from a rail car on the way to a rail siding, a short track connecting with the main track about 30 miles from Mojave in Kern County, just east of Bakersfield. The rail car was sealed when it left the Cheyenne facility, and the seals were still intact when it arrived in Saltdale. A spokesperson for the company, the manufacturer explosive, told USA Today. The rail car was also observed after departure in the railroad Cheyenne yard with the seals intact and no sign of any leaks. They just specifically on a 300 frickin' long-ass western-bound train with 300 cars attached to it, they just somehow saw the seals were okay, which are inspected, Olivia, on multiple stops. Multiple stops. Every major thoroughfare, city, or populace would have to inspect this to ensure integrity before entering the city. That's called safety. The initial assessment is that a leak through the bottom gate on the rail car may have developed in transit, according to the company, releasing pellets onto the tracks over the 2-week trip. Officials said the rail car was transported back to Wyoming, where it will be inspected. Our review will be exhaustive to understand what led to this situation, but there is no indication of any danger to the public and no indication the pellets were intentionally taken by anyone, the Dino Mobile said. Does that sound like bullshit to everybody? So you carry it in a hopper car, which is basically a V-shaped or half of a square with the top off and usually is tarp covered or temporary roofing covered. It doesn't sound like a compartmentalized car to me. It sounds like it's iron and metal and steel, the things you don't transfer ammonium nitrate in. According to the EPA, because I just showed you the EPA said transferring it in that condition is absolutely against the Environmental Protection Agency, which is also responsible for the Department of Transportation. Yeah. Folks,
bullshit.
It sounds like bullshit to me. Was it on the train at all? Is it just missing? Do they know what happened to it? And why are you doing an investigation if you can assuredly say that there was no danger and there was no robbery or anything nefarious? Then why are you doing an investigation if you know all that? And if it was sealed when it arrived and you inspected it and it's sealed when it left and it took a 2-week journey, what happened to it between there and there? Did we drop it off to some military bases without going ahead and disclosing it? Is that possible? Did that happen? Maybe some white national groups got a hold of it, Olivia. What do you think?
Was the whole train found or just the train car?
That's what they said, train car.
So
right.
So
right. I wonder why I do these shows. You know what? But see, and people go and watch and give 12 million views to At War Clandestine with his bioweapon labs when all he has is a horrible map with some initial strikes that don't line up at all. But I give you all of this, and my show doesn't have fucking 10,000 people watching it. I give up. I quit. I'm done. I give up. Today's my last day.
Not only is the problem that it's missing, how the hell did the train car get taken away from the train?
Well,
and how
obviously,
did not somebody notice.
Obviously, it was detached from the main line and left in Saltdale, and then it went to an undisclosed location that just happens to be China Lake Naval Weapons Training Center, and also 4 other bases, including Ellis, including Andrews, including Area 51. Hello. How did it get off the train? Well, obviously, you have the broker line, which is right there, and it ends in Saltdale. That's the only thing up there. And the only thing at that terminal end is the China Lake Naval Weapons Training Center and Testing Center. Melanie's calling in. Folks, I did a lot of research on this. I'm just letting you know. That's good investigative journalism right there.
I'm David Boreanaz with the Cast of SEAL team, and we have an important message for returning vets.
We want you to know if you're struggling to cope, there's help and it's just a phone call away.
The Veterans Crisis Line is staffed with experienced professionals who know your struggles.
There's no greater sacrifice in service to our country. We're able to enjoy our freedoms because of it.
Your service is important. You are important.
For vets and their families, the Veterans Crisis Line is here to help 24 hours a day. Please call